So I finally got a chance to upgrade my light setup, sort of. For quite some time now, I've only been using 4 lights for shooting my content. For my main light, I use a Yongnuo bicolor LED panel, which I use to shoot my talking head videos and close-ups of me tinkering with camera gear and equipment. And for my fill or backlight, I use 3 Nanlite RGB tube lights. I also use these for additional accent lighting or as practical lights because I can basically stick them around anywhere, and when I want to be more creative and put more color in my shots, these are definitely my go-to lights. I use these a lot actually. But these do have a bunch of limitations. Mainly, they're not as bright as I'd want them to be, so I do have to consider bumping up my ISO or turning up the lights all the way up to maximum brightness. But a couple of weeks ago, MQ Group and Nanlite PH reached out and asked if I wanted to test the Nanlite Pavoslim 120C and the Nanlite FS-300C. These are bigger and more powerful lights compared to my current setup, and I was super excited to try them out and see what shots I could get. So it was an easy yes, and I used these 2 lights together with my other lights to shoot the B-roll for my last 2 videos. Now I only had these for a couple of days, so this isn't going to be an in-depth review, but I'd like to share my thoughts, what I liked about them, what may not have necessarily worked for me, how I set up my shots, and if I would get them for myself. So if you're like me and you have a smaller setup or a smaller studio, my studio is basically my small and tiny bedroom, then this video may be the video for you. First off, we have the Nanlite Pavoslim 120C, which is a 2x1 RGB LED panel with a really high brightness output. It provides both bicolor CCT and RGB lighting, can be powered through AC or a V-mount battery, has a really convenient pop-up softbox, 2 sets of diffusion, and an egg crate grid. It has multiple mounting points at the back, and you can use a swivel holder to attach it to a C-stand, allowing you to set the panel either vertically or horizontally and at different angles, giving you a lot of options. Then we have the FS-300C, which is a bicolor RGB LED spotlight and is more than double the brightness of the 120C. It comes with the Bowens mount reflector, and you can of course use different types of modifiers to shape your light. It has built-in Bluetooth, which allows you to control the light with a phone or tablet through the Nanlink mobile app, and you can even connect and control multiple light sources. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to test these out because I didn't have enough time, but hopefully in the future I'll be able to. What both of these have in common, aside from the RGB and the bicolor lighting, is that they have a bunch of light effects that can be very useful for when you're trying to simulate different types of scenarios. And you can even customize these effects, which I find is a very cool feature. So let me show you how I set up some of my shots for my last 2 videos. In this first shot, I used the Pavoslim 120C as my key light with my tube lights to add fill or accent lighting. I set up the 120C a little higher and at an angle to my scene and added the tube lights inside my shelves for additional color contrast. Not very practical, I know, but I love the interplay between the blue and the yellow lighting. In this next shot, I angled the 120C towards my wall to bounce off the light back to my subject, the plastic container, and again I have 1 tube light on the other side for that creative lighting touch. Then for my talking head, I basically use the same setup that I usually do, with the 120C acting as my key light and the 300C directed towards the ceiling to bounce a nice soft blue color into the background. For my close-ups, I played around with the same setup, but in most scenarios, even just having the 120C alone was enough, and I really love how soft the light was coming into the scene. Finally, I tried out a bunch of effects with the FS-300C, specifically the pulse and the flash effects, to create a nice moody vibe to go with the synthy and retro theme of my last few videos. So let's start with the pros first. Both of them have great light quality. The 300C has really good maximum brightness, and I really don't have to worry about my ISO when shooting with either lights because I can easily control the light as I need to. The 120C is really easy to set up, so it does have that edge over the 300C, The pop-up softbox was super convenient, and adding the egg crate grid was also really easy. The menu system on both is really beginner friendly. Even if it's your first time using them, you'll definitely figure it out. And if you're coming from the Nanlite tube lights, you'll already know what to do. You have one knob that you can turn to switch across the different items on the menu, and another knob that lets you fine-tune those specific settings. And there's a separate button that lets you easily access different lighting modes, whether it's the CCT, RGB, or FX lighting, making it pretty quick if you need to change up your settings. And of course, because these are powerful lights, you can easily use these for either a more simple or more professional setup, depending on your needs. Now for the cons, because these are pretty big lights, and this boils down to my own particular needs for my own setup. They do take up a little bit more space, especially here in my small room, and it's not as easy to move them around. Unlike my tube lights, I have to take extra care on where I place them in my room, or they might actually show up in my shots, or there might be instances where it won't be practical to place them in a particular angle, even though that's where I want my light to be. For the 300C specifically, it was harder to set up a softbox because the modifier was really big and it would have taken up a lot of space in my room, which I can barely get around here already. If you can see my current setup now, I'll take a quick video. Also, these lights are more expensive. The 120C comes to about $800, which is around 45,000 pesos, 44,000 pesos. And the 300C comes to about $440. That amount alone is roughly the same amount for all of my current lights combined. So yeah, it's definitely a big investment. I have to consider where I can place them in my room or where I can store them when I'm not using. But if that's something that you don't have to worry about, if you have the space, if you have the cash to spare, then I really do recommend either one of these lights. Right off the bat, when I started using these lights, I could see through my monitor just how great the images were. The bigger and more powerful lights from the 120C and the 300C allowed me to use the base ISO of 800 on my FX3, creating a cleaner image. The light cast is also pretty natural and not as harsh compared to my usual setup, and the lighting is quite even because of the bigger coverage of the lights. And this really reminded me how important lights are when shooting. It doesn't matter if you have the best camera out there, but if your light setup or your composition or your production design isn't done well, your shots will come off as very mediocre. And I know for myself that's still something I'm working on, but having those lights to play around with really helped a lot in letting me learn how to properly shape, position, and just use those lights to my advantage. Unfortunately, I had to return these, but again, I want to thank MQ Group and Nanlite PH, and of course RL for reaching out to me and letting me test these lights. Now, if I could actually keep one, which one would I choose? For my needs, for my setup, possibly for future work, it would most likely be the Pavoslim 120C, just because of the ease of use, the slightly smaller footprint compared to 300C when using a modifier. So that's it for today. Thank you guys for watching. It's already October, and it's my favorite spooky season, and I'm planning some Halloween related content in the next couple of weeks, so please stay tuned for that. And if you haven't yet, please do subscribe to the channel for more filmmaking, and everything else in between videos. I'll see you guys soon. Bye!